For compound inequalities, it really depends on whether it says and or. If it's an and situation, your graph is going to be together. And your answers could be three different ways. It could be a number with x in the middle, and these inequalities are always going to go to the left. Or it could use the word and in your answer. Or it could be an interval notation, it's just two parentheses followed by the numbers. In an or situation, the graph is separated, it's apart, and the answer could be a couple of different ways. It could be an equation separated by the word or using interval notation, it's negative infinity a number, union with a number, and positive infinity. So when I solve these, I'm going to give the answers in the various ways that you can write them so that you're familiar with all of the different ways you could write the answer. Okay, so first of all, I notice that this is an or situation. So I'm going to treat these equations separately. So I'm going to pretend like it's an equal sign. So the first step is you want to get x by itself. So you have to do the opposite of adding 2. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So you bring down the x, opposites cancel, is less than negative 4, and then another negative 2 is a total of 6 negatives. This next one, now you do this one separately. This is negative 5 times x, the opposite of times is divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 5. But you've got to be careful with inequalities because when you divide by a negative number, you have to flip the inequality. So top cancels with bottom. It's not going to be a less than because we divided by a negative number. It's going to be greater than. The negatives cancel top and bottom. 15 divided by 5 is 3. So the solution to this is x is less than negative 6 or x is greater than 3. Now, if I wanted to write that solution in interval notation, you've got to kind of imagine how it would fit on a number line. 3 would be here and negative 6 would be here. So in interval notation, you start with negative infinity always, and negative infinity always has a parentheses, and then comma, the first number that would appear on the number line. So negative 6. Now because this inequality is not underlined, you're going to use parentheses, unioned with parentheses. I'm using parentheses for the 3 because the inequality is not underlined. And then positive infinity. Infinities always have parentheses. So that's how you would write that answer using interval notation. Okay, the next one, you want to get x by itself, so you've got to get rid of the positive 7 or adding 7. So the opposite of adding 7 is subtracting 7, but you're going to do it from each piece like this. Negative 7, negative 7. Okay, so 0 take away 7 is negative 7. The inequality stays like it is. You bring down the x, the opposites cancel. You bring down the inequality, and 9 take away 7 is 2. So that is one way to write the solution. Okay, another way to write it is with just splitting these up. So x is greater than negative 7. I put a greater than there because look how the mouth points towards the x. So when you rewrite it, it still has to point towards the x like it was originally. And then I'm going to use the word and x. Now for the 2, the mouth is pointing away from the x. So that's another way to write it. And then the final way to write it is just with putting them together. So negative 7, and I'm using parentheses because this inequality is not underlined. And then the 2, the inequality is not underlined, so I'm also going to use parentheses. So those are 3 different ways to write the answer for that solution. Okay, solve and graph on a number line. So again, this is an or situation. So 5 times x, I'm going to divide by 5 on both sides. Top cancels with bottom, so x is greater than or equal to 20 divided by 5 is 4. Or I'm going to subtract 14 from both sides. So I've got my x, opposites cancel, is less than 16, take away 14 is 2. Now this is an or problem, so my graph is going to be separated. However, you have to be careful with what kind of dots you use. If the the inequality is not underlined, you use an open circle. If it is underlined, you're going to use a closed circle. So I'm going to draw my number line, and I am going to put, I always show 0, 0, 2, 4. Okay, so at 4, since this inequality is underlined, I am going to, at 4, since it's underlined, I'm going to draw a closed circle. For the 2, it's not underlined, so I draw an open circle. And because it's an OR situation originally, you want to split them up. And again, for interval notation, another way to write that is like it would fit on the number line. So I'd go from -infinity to 2, and that's going to have parentheses because it's an open circle, union with 4, and sorry, that's not going to be a parentheses because it's underlined. So when it's underlined, you use brackets. It's a closed circle, so use brackets. 4, and then infinity always has parentheses. Okay, write an inequality for the graph. Well, the first thing I notice is that this graph is, they are separated, they're not together, so it's an OR situation. So then I always start with X no matter what. Now see how this arrow is pointing to the left? So I want my inequality to point to the left. And because it's a closed circle, I underline it, and then that number is -2. Now this next one, always start with X. This arrow is pointing to the right, so you want your inequality to point to the right. And because it's an open circle, you do not underline it, and the number is 5. So this is the inequality for that graph.